everybody, Ta here. I hope everybody's doing well. So, active 24 hours just passed through here, and it's part of the reason why we're a little bit behind schedule here. Also, overnight, I think lightning might have struck my building, or maybe took out a tree right next to it. And I guess you can kind of verify that with the severe reports that we're getting off to the west of my area over here. This is just outside Atlanta, where we had several wind reports. As far as the overall event yesterday was concerned with severe weather, three tornado reports. I think that maybe at least one of these actually might have been pretty strong, but based off of what damage reports were indicating, I don't expect a high rating out of it. So, not nothing to really like rave about here per se, but we could be in for another repeat or maybe even a bigger severe weather event in the future along with winter weather here as well. If you look towards the bottom left corner of your screen here, you can see that we have the snowfall analysis over the last 48 hours here. And we also had some pretty significant snowfall over towards the Midwest. There's a big bullseye, especially over towards Des Moines, Iowa, heading all the way into southern parts of Wisconsin here. We also got a good bit of snow in areas like Chicago and such as well. There's going to be another storm system that rolls in a little bit further up towards the north that's going to affect the Great Lakes as well. Again, I do think Chicago is going to be a point of interest there. But other cities like Grand Rapids, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, and of course anywhere along Lake Erie and Ontario is going to become a point of interest as well before all is said and done. To Buffalo, Rochester, you need to be on the watch too as we go forward here. So as we continue to move forward, we're not going to be doing a model comparison here since we're putting this video up really late. So we got the newest GFS available to us, and we're also looking at, of course, the snowfall probabilities before all is said and done. But one thing that we're going to be looking at right now is, of course, that signal that's going to be popping up over the Midwest. We're looking at snowfall probabilities for accumulation of 4 inches or greater, and there is a very robust signal as we go throughout the weekend that stretches all the way from parts of Wisconsin, maybe even Minnesota, stretches through Michigan, and then eventually works its way into the interior northeast here. Seems like as we go further off towards the south just a bit here into southern New England, I wouldn't expect quite as much out of this. There's still potential to get snowfall, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to see anything of major significance for these regions. About 4 inches plus is where you would start to be like, oh, this is actually a decent snowstorm. At least that's what I've heard from most folks around the area. But in any case, though, does look like there's a very clear signal of yet another winter storm to go along with the severe weather threat that we have for Saturday. So as far as ice is concerned, we actually have to look towards the mid-Atlantic once again. We have a signal for at least about 1/10 of an inch of ice accretion. So very good confidence in that. Once we get to that 1/4 inch range, though, confidence kind of drops off. Again, this will be towards the latter half of the weekend here. I expect this to be a pretty quick moving system here, so I don't expect major accumulation as of right now. We'll have to see how things pan out with that. But all of this is going to be a setup for yet another system to come in right after this one. We have yet another system heading towards the Midwest as we head towards the middle of next week. And then this may even come into play for the deep south here. So a lot to keep track of in the long run here. And then to go along with the potential of a southern winter event, a large part of this is going to be possible due to the big temperature change here. Look at just how significant and how confident the CPC is in this temperature drop here. When you have a navy blue color like this here, you're looking at 80 to potentially even 90% chance of temperatures dropping below average, and usually when this happens it's well below average too to go along with it. So active times look like they're ahead for a large part of the country. I don't really think anyone's going to be exempt from this cold blast unless you're out towards the extreme west coast here and maybe towards the southwest. Otherwise, you might be either just at average or a little bit below. But of course, over towards the heart of the country and maybe the southeast parts of the Ohio Valley, this is where the coldest air is going to exist from the looks of it. Now, this is going to be prevalent as we go towards the day 8 to 14 range too as well. It's really not going to go away until we get towards the very end of the month and probably the start of March here. So definitely a lot to pay attention to in regards to the temperatures as well. Don't put those coats away just yet. it looks like Punxsutawney Phil might have been right after all, even though the last few days, depending on where you are, you've been dealing with 70s. Again, as we mentioned before, here's our severe weather threat. We have our hatched risk over here. It's a 30% area. It's an enhanced risk for severe weather. I'm thinking as of right now, or the thinking as of right now, is the main threat is going to be damaging winds and tornadoes, a lot like this last system, but the environment is a little bit better set up for this event versus the last one, I would say. But a lot of questions still remain with this one as well, and we'll get into the details of that with our video tomorrow afternoon. I don't want to make this video too much longer for you guys, but what we're going to also do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at the flash flood potential, not just with today, because there actually is quite a prominent issue over here towards LA where we have a moderate risk for flash flooding. And the issue, of course, being with there being such heavy drought and wildfire damage, debris flows are going to be a big issue. Now, as we go further along here, day 2 is pretty quiet. When we get to day 3, we now have a moderate risk for flash flooding as well. And the ironic thing about this is the fact that a lot of these same areas are seeing potential for snow to go along with this. So eventually, depending on how much accumulation you get, that could actually add to the problem as we go further down the line here. So pretty unique situation unfolding here with this upcoming winter storm here. Very dynamic environment that we have across the board here. Eventually, as we go further along, the flooding threat does start to dissipate just a bit here. So a quick look at what our jet stream is looking like. I mean, pretty much the same thing that we've been talking about. Here's our upcoming system with our severe weather potential here. It's really going to start to fire off later in the evening from what I've been seeing off of most recent model runs here. The Euro's still in range at this point, but like I said, in this one, we're not going to make a comparison. Just going to try to give you guys a little bit of a quicker video. I know these last few have been pretty long. As we go further along into Wednesday and Thursday here, we do have a trough that comes in. Depending on how much moisture is left available here, this could result maybe even in some freezing rain and some snow here for the Carolinas. This definitely kind of leans a little bit closer towards a potential mid-Atlantic event. There's still other factors that come into play here. But as we go further along here, it seems like that pattern becomes more conducive for maybe a southern snowstorm threat. Obviously, at this range, I don't want to put a lot of merit into it. But this is a big Arctic, almost Arctic level cool down once again, like what we saw before. So depending on what we have going on here, and it could also be a classic case of the moisture outrunning the cold air, which means a lot of people will probably get nothing. I mean, anything's really possible at this point. I would even go as far as to say that maybe even towards Tennessee, North Georgia, Northern Alabama, maybe even Northern Mississippi might not be done with old man winter just yet. But like I said, a lot really depends on the dynamics as we go further, as we get closer into range here. We're super far out at this point. We're over 15 days out at this point though. So like I said, can't put a lot of merit into this right now, but interesting look from the GFS. Can't even really call this a signal because there's a little bit of model disagreement too from what I've been seeing off of the most recent trends here. So we'll have to see how things progress from that point. As you guys know, any of you that have been watching the channel for a while, I'm not really into overhyping a storm, especially if it's over a week out or even 5 days out. Now, this is going to be a big topic over here, and it's going to be a big cool down as we go further and further along with this weather model here. As you can see, as we get into the end of this week, we can see that warm air moves out, cold air really starts to move in and make its presence felt over the deep south here. We look further towards the north, you can actually see these temperatures reaching 10 to 15 degrees below zero. So significant cold air moving into the north, and this is of course going to push its way south. These temperatures aren't exactly going to make it all the way down to, let's say, Kentucky or anything like last month per se, but you're going to feel a notable difference in the weather and compared to what you have been dealing with. Some of us, like I said, over towards the deep south, for example, and some of us still are getting those temperatures up to about 70 degrees plus, which for those of you that are getting that, it's pretty nice. But anyone else that is not getting that, I'm sure that you will not be happy with this upcoming weather pattern. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but somebody's got to do it. That's just what it is. But in any case, though, as we go further along, let's go ahead and take a look at the precipitation forecast. And again, this is where things kind of get a bit more juicy here. As you can see, we get our upcoming winter storm here. This is our severe weather look right now. Like I said, kind of leaning more towards the damaging wind threat with this linear mode here, but any cells that form out ahead of this could have the potential to produce a tornado, potentially even strong ones. As we go further along here, we start out as snow towards the northeast, but with this low being as strong as it is and pulling more warm air, we end out as rain, or so we would think. Then we get mountain snow on the or lake effect snow and mountain snow on the back side of this, also potential for some lake enhanced snow. As we go further along here is our next storm beginning to manifest, and this is where things kind of get interesting for the deep south here. Depending on how far this cold air pushes, and also we also have to keep an eye out for the potential of any sort of low pressure that could form in the Gulf here. Sometimes this does happen, and this is really how the last couple of winter storms have occurred here. The low pressure had formed just off the Texas coast here, and depending on its track determined often who ended up getting snow. Sometimes it was further off towards the north, or it was further off towards the south. It's just really but it's that low pressure and the strength of that low that really makes the big difference here. And as you can see, low does pop up over here on the GFS here. It's not a strong low pressure, so it's not going to push that cold air quite as far to the north here, or it's going to help keep that, or warm air I should say, excuse me. It's not pushing that warm air as far up to the north. So in this case here, it really depends more so on how much cold air we'll have available to determine what the outcome would be here. It does look like as we go forward here, depending on how much moisture is left, there could be some snow for the deep south here before all is said and done, particularly towards Alabama and Georgia in particular. Over towards Mississippi, it's a little bit more of a mystery. I think we could get easily a little bit of freezing rain, but the significant accumulations I'm thinking is going to be mainly reserved for the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic as of right now. Obviously at this range though, we'll start to be able to get a much clearer picture over the course of the next couple of days. We'll see this storm system roll out, and then we'll start to see that cold air begin to move in further towards the south, start to see action towards the northeast here, and we'll really just kind of be watching for clipper systems for a bit. But the warm air is going to be in place just enough to keep a lot of the precipitation towards the end of the month as rain, but we'll have to keep an eye on this because, as we've seen before, these troughs, these low pressure areas, they can over or underperform very easily. So a lot to monitor before all is said and done here. So as we finish this out here, we're going to be taking a look at our potential for freezing rain over the next 10 days here. There is a decent signal that's popped up over here towards the Carolinas. That's not surprising at all considering what we had just talked about here. And there's also a decent signal over here towards the northeast. Do I think that all of this will be falling at once over towards the area? Not entirely. I do think at least for the first storm system, or maybe two, up to about 1/10 of an inch of ice is possible. Still going to cause for hazardous travel, but nothing that will be crippling. Once you start getting towards that 1/4 inch of ice accretion mark and beyond here, that's when we really would start to run into problems at that point. Also can see some small signals here and there over towards parts of Arkansas. I think for the most part, the states should be a little bit more worried about snow than ice as of right now. But of course, it's those mid-levels of the atmosphere we're going to have to watch over the next couple days. Speaking of snowfall, let's go ahead and take a look at said snowfall. We'll also go ahead and take a look at rainfall before all of this is done. But strong signal, again, for a lot of activity over here towards the northeast. Some areas could easily get close to 2 feet of snow within the next 10 days. And that's the key word I want you to remember, within the next 10 days. I don't want you guys saying Ty told me that I'm getting snow, 2 feet of snow all of a sudden. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over time, and it won't all accumulate at once either from the looks of it. But in any case though, some other strong signals that we're noticing other than the mountain snow, which we've been harping on for almost a month now at this point, it's going to be over towards the Midwest, towards Kansas. There's potential for up to about 6 inches of snow over the next 10. Of course, Great Lakes, we've been talking about a couple of storm systems coming through there. And then our Mid-Atlantic system, that one kind of has kind of gives me a little bit of a question mark, but we do have a couple that come into play. And depending on how much snow we end up getting, I do think about 6 to 12 inches is possible if you're in the mountains. Towards the valleys, I expect much lower totals, probably more about 2 to 4, maybe even 3 to 5 inches over the next 10. But in any case, though, let's go ahead and finish this out by looking at our quantum precipitation as a whole here. And the signal that I'm paying attention to the most is, of course, going to be over towards the deep south and parts of the Ohio Valley here, where that moderate risk for flash flooding exists. And then also, of course, over towards LA. We still have a decent signal over here over the next 10. It does seem like things slow down just a little bit, but still about 1 to 2 inches of rain is still possible over there. A lot of these areas that we're looking at in the yellow here is snowfall. The quantum precipitation takes in all forms of precipitation into account. So that includes winter weather here. But in the warm sector where we know it's going to be rain, or starting out at rain at least, it's going to be over here again towards the Ohio Valley and parts of Tennessee as well, where we could easily get about 4 to 5 inches. Most of this will be falling in the form of rain, but eventually we will have a little bit of a switchover occurring. Over towards the deep south, we also have South Georgia, Florida Panhandle, and the Gulf Coast in general, looking like it's going to be pretty busy over there as a whole as well. Not quite as concerned about the flood threat there, but any storms that end up training over this area, just kind of coming in one after the other, is going to be of concern here too, of course. But that's the weather pattern as a whole here. We'll try to keep this one under 20 minutes. In any case, though, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Sorry for the delay. And I will see you guys tomorrow. That's a fact. Until then, it's been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. Have a great rest of your night.